Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a great show for you today. We're just going to go over a lot that's been going on this week. Of course, a lot's been going on in the whole wide world, but of course, things haven't been stopping in Ukraine, so we'll try to go over everything. If you could, please do subscribe to the Tochnyi channel. Please hit the like button. Check us out on Twitter and Blue Sky. We do post social media updates there. But of course, we have our main website, Tochnyi.info. That's where we put our articles, our interactive maps, and other research. So if you have time, check out Tochnyi.info. It's a great place to get more in-depth information for some of the stuff we talk about here. Chat, if you have any questions for us, please do ask any questions that you have during the broadcast. We'll do our best to get to all your questions toward the end. So as always, I will first present the news, then we'll have a little discussion of an article with Stanimir, then we'll talk about some other news, then we'll get to the Q&A. So without any further delay, I will now present the news. These are the main headlines as of January 11th, 2026. First up, we have operations. During the night of January 10th, Ukraine's defense forces carried out a strike on the Zhytovska oil depot located in the Oktyabrski district of Russia's Volgograd Oblast. The information was released by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine through its official online channels. The General Staff stated that the targeted facility plays a role in providing fuel to units of the occupying forces. An evaluation of the impact and extent of the damage from the attack is still underway. The regional governor of Volgograd Oblast confirmed that a fire broke out at the oil depot, saying that it was caused by debris from an unmanned aerial vehicle. He reported that no one was injured as a result of the incident. The same day, Ukrainian forces also carried out strikes against additional objectives in occupied areas. In Zaporizhia Oblast, a storage site for unmanned aerial vehicles used by a unit of the Russian Armed Forces' 19th Motorized Rifle Division was destroyed. In the Pokrovsk area, a control point used to operate UAVs was also hit. Ukrainian drones struck production facilities belonging to Russia's largest producer of power sources used in military equipment. Video recordings of the incident circulated online, including footage published by Astra. The strike was directed at the Energia enterprise in the city of Yelets, located in Russia's Lipetsk region. According to the city's mayor, the drone activity began in the early morning hours of January 4th. The facility has been targeted on multiple previous occasions, including twice in July of last year. Energia is a Russian manufacturer focused on producing sealed lead-acid, nickel-cadmium, and lithium-ion batteries, along with uninterruptible power supplies and other electrochemical energy systems designed to meet military specifications. Its products are used across a broad range of weapon systems, from tactical unmanned aircraft to intercontinental ballistic missiles. Power units manufactured at the plant have been identified in Iskander ballistic missiles, aerial munitions equipped with guidance kit, and the Kinzhal air-launched ballistic missile. According to Russian contractor monitoring data, the company holds contracts worth many millions of dollars with more than 20 defense sector customers, including direct agreements with the Ministry of Defense and partnerships with other defense industry enterprises. Only 3 companies in Russia operate in this specialized field, with Energia being the largest among them. A Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter upgraded to the Mu-1 standard carried out an airstrike that destroyed a road bridge near Pokrovsk, which Russian forces had been using to move supplies and as cover for assault units. Video of the strike was published by the Sonyashnik Telegram channel. The footage shows that the aircraft released 2 French-produced AASM hammer-guided bombs on the target. This location had been struck before, but earlier attempts did not fully eliminate the structure. In this instance, the pilot achieved a direct and effective hit that resulted in the complete collapse of the bridge. The MiG-29 Mu-1 is a modernized version of the MiG-29 used by Ukraine. The upgrade program includes replacing several elements of the N019 radar, which increased the range for detecting airborne targets by roughly 30%. The aircraft also received the SN-330701 satellite navigation system, an updated communication suite, and other technical improvements. Modernization work involves a full overhaul of the aircraft based on its condition. The jet is fully disassembled, and its airframe, engine, onboard systems, and equipment are inspected, repaired as needed, and then reassembled. These measures extend the service life of the aircraft by about 700 additional flight hours. On average, upgrading a single fighter to the MU-1 standard takes around 9 months. As of 2021, the cost of this modernization was estimated at approximately 100 million hryvnias per aircraft, equivalent to about 3.6 million US dollars. Ukraine had the capacity to carry out upgrades on about 10 aircraft per year under this program. Up next, we have economy and aid. Sweden has already delivered a total of 26 Archer self-propelled artillery systems to Ukraine, according to a statement from the Swedish embassy in Ukraine shared on social media. The embassy reported that the systems were transferred as military assistance and are actively used by Ukrainian units, including the 45th Separate Artillery Brigade. Ukrainian personnel have described the system as highly effective when engaging Russian positions at ranges reaching up to 50 kilometers. The embassy also stated that the high operational tempo of the Archer systems has caused accelerated wear on their barrels. To address the issue, Sweden supplied Ukraine with more than 10 replacement barrels last year. The Archer is a modern self-propelled howitzer mounted on a heavy off-road vehicle and operated remotely from an armored cabin. Its key features include advanced ballistic computing, the ability to rapidly change firing positions, a high level of accuracy, and compatibility with internationally standardized ammunition. In September of last year, the Swedish government announced its 20th military assistance package for Ukraine valued at 836 million US dollars. That package included 18 newly produced Archer artillery systems. The United Kingdom has supplied Ukraine with 13 Raven air defense systems and intends to deliver additional Gravehawk units in the near future, according to a written response to Parliament dated on the 6th of January. The Minister for Veterans confirmed that all 13 Raven systems had been transferred and are already in service with Ukrainian forces. The systems provide Ukrainian units with a rapidly deployable means of countering Russian aerial threats. Raven is a British-funded capability designed specifically to meet Ukraine's operational needs. It adapts the Royal Air Force's AIM-132 ASRAAM air-to-air missile for launch from the ground. The system is intended to counter drones, fixed-wing aircraft, and helicopters close to the front line, with a limited capability to engage cruise missiles. The Ministry of Defense also provided an update on the Gravehawk program. 2 prototype Gravehawk air defense systems have already been delivered to Ukraine. Of the additional 15 systems currently under contract, the first group is expected to arrive shortly. Gravehawk was developed through a joint British-Danish initiative. It modifies Ukraine's existing R-73 air-to-air missiles for ground-based use, an approach aimed at simplifying supply and maintenance. The system is primarily optimized to counter drone threats, but can also engage aircraft and helicopters, with limited capability against cruise missiles. Its main role is the protection of critical infrastructure from long-range Russian strikes. Together, the Raven and Gravehawk programs are part of the UK's approach to quickly developing and fielding weapon systems based on immediate battlefield requirements. The Ministry of Defense has highlighted Raven in particular as an example of accelerated innovation shaped directly by operational demands in Ukraine. Ukraine has selected a group of investors to develop one of Ukraine's most promising lithium deposits after completing a tender for production sharing agreement that was launched during the summer. According to a source from the New York Times, although the Ukrainian government has yet to formally sign the agreement, the officials told the newspaper that a government commission has already made the decision in practice, clearing the way for the project to move forward. The winning consortium includes TechMet, a mining firm supported by the United States government, along with billionaire Ronald S. Lauder, who is known as a close associate of the U.S. president. The investor group has for years shown interest in the Dobra lithium deposit in central Kirovrad Oblast. The site is considered one of Ukraine's most valuable mineral assets, with estimated reserves ranging from 80 to 105 million metric tons of lithium. The mineral is classified by the United States as critical for its importance in clean energy technologies. Ukraine formally opened bidding for the Dobra deposit in August of 2025, and TechMet was widely viewed as the leading contender from an early stage. This assessment was largely based on the company's backing from U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, a government agency created during the U.S. president's first term in office. This is the first major investment in the minerals agreement that was concluded in 2025, which granted preferential assets to U.S. businesses through a jointly established U.S.-Ukraine Reconstruction Fund developed with the involvement of the Development Finance Corporation. Ukraine has been placed at the center of Lithuania's updated national security strategy for 2026, which was presented by the Lithuanian Ministry of National Defense. Under the strategy, Lithuania intends to allocate no less than 0.25% of its national GDP each year to support Ukraine in security and defense matters. The assistance will include ongoing training for Ukrainian service members, the provision of military equipment, and broader forms of support. The document identifies Russia as a fundamental threat to Lithuania and to the wider transatlantic community. Lithuanian authorities assess that Moscow could be prepared for large-scale military action against NATO by 2030. The strategy is structured around three major policy pillars: strengthening national armed defense, reinforcing societal resilience, and shaping a favorable international security environment. Lithuania reaffirmed its commitment to funding defense spending at between 5 and 6% of GDP through 2030. At the same time, Lithuania plans to extend its regional cooperation through frameworks such as the Nordic-Baltic 8 and the Northern Group. These formats are intended to complement NATO's role while also serving as mechanisms to strengthen assistance to Ukraine, which Lithuania views as a crucial element for maintaining stability in Europe. Up next, we have international relations. Canadian lawmaker Chrystia Freeland is leaving Parliament and the Canadian government to take an unpaid role as an economic advisor to the President of Ukraine, marking her full exit from Canadian federal politics after more than a decade in elected office. Freeland said the position is voluntary and represents a personal decision rather than a continuation of her political career. On January 5th, Freeland announced on Twitter that she would step down from her role as the special representative for the reconstruction of Ukraine in Canada. She also stated that she plans to formally resign her seat in the parliament within the coming weeks. In explaining her decision, she said that Ukraine now stands at the center of the global struggle for democratic values, and she welcomed the opportunity to contribute as an unpaid advisor. Freeland has been appointed as a non-staff advisor to the Ukrainian president with a focus on economic development. Her statement confirmed that she is relinquishing both her parliamentary mandate and her remaining government responsibilities. She had indicated previously that she did not intend to seek re-election. Freeland was first elected to Parliament in 2013, and she served in senior cabinet roles between 2015 and 2025, making her one of the most prominent figures in the Liberal Party during that period. Finnish authorities carried out an operation involving 3 helicopters to stop and secure the cargo vessel Fitberg, which is suspected of causing damage to an underwater communications cable. The interception was led by the Finnish border guard, whose special intervention unit was deployed from a helicopter to board the ship. The action made use of the Super Puma helicopters operated by the Finnish border guard alongside NH-90 helicopters belonging to the Finnish Defense Forces. The vessel was stopped on New Year's Eve, December 31st. Finnish customs later reported that the Fitberg was transporting steel products that fall under international sanctions regimes. Maritime security during the operation was ensured by the Finnish border guard's patrol vessels Turva and Wisko, as well as a coastal patrol craft. Police took 14 crew members into custody, among them nationals of Russia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan. Law enforcement authorities have since requested the detention of 1 crew member from the ship. Another individual was placed under a travel restriction on January 3rd. Police are seeking custody of an Azerbaijani citizen, while a travel ban has been imposed on a Russian citizen. 2 additional crew members had previously been subjected to similar restrictions, bringing the total number of individuals under travel bans to 3. Vessel tracking data from marine traffic shows the Fitberg had been traveling from St. Petersburg toward Haifa, Israel, prior to being intercepted. Following reports of damage to a subsea cable, Finnish authorities identified the ship as a suspect, redirecting it to Finnish territorial waters and escorting it to the port of Kondvik, where as of now it remains docked. The UK plans to deploy military units to the Arctic to monitor Russian submarine activity and safeguard vital undersea infrastructure following the implementation of the Luna House Agreement, a major defense arrangement concluded with Norway in December of 2025. Tensions in the Arctic are partly driven by unresolved boundaries in the region. Under international law, no state holds sovereignty over the North Pole or the Arctic Ocean itself. However, Russia, the United States, Canada, Norway, and Denmark each control exclusive economic zones extending up to 200 nautical miles from their coastlines. As part of the new agreement, the UK's commando force under the Royal Marines will be permanently stationed in Norway. Previously, British troops were deployed to the region only seasonally, primarily for winter-based Arctic training. The Luna House Agreement also provides for development of a shared and interoperable fleet of anti-submarine frigates operating in the North Atlantic. The initiative is intended to address Russia's sustained military expansion in the Arctic and the growing level of military cooperation between Moscow and Beijing in the region. Concerns about Russia's posture in the region have been raised previously within NATO. In October of 2024, the chair of NATO's military committee warned that Russia continued to expand its military capabilities in the Arctic and emphasized the alliance's intention to protect its interests and uphold freedom of navigation. And last item this week. The United Nations Security Council is scheduled to meet on January 12th to address developments in Ukraine after Russia employed an intercontinental ballistic missile known as Oreshnik close to NATO territory. The missile reached a speed of roughly 13,000 kilometers per hour and struck Ukraine's Lviv Oblast. The launch targeted a region bordering Poland, a NATO member, and took place immediately after the completion of a proposed framework for security guarantees in Ukraine. The proposal had been delivered to the Russian head of state, and the United States was waiting for a definitive response from the Kremlin on whether it would accept the plan. The missile strike that followed the next day was viewed by some as Moscow's answer. The security guarantee proposal includes the possibility of deploying Allied personnel to train Ukrainian forces. Russia has repeatedly protested this possibility. At the same time as the Oreshnik launch, Russia conducted a large-scale assault on Kyiv using ballistic and cruise missiles in 6 successive waves. At least 5 civilians lost their lives, and parts of the capital were left without heating and water during severe winter conditions, with temperatures dropping to minus 15 degrees Celsius. Residents described the night as one of the most frightening experiences since the start of the full-scale invasion. Russian authorities have publicly confirmed the use of the Oreshnik missile and said it was a response to an alleged strike on the residence of the Russian head of state. The claim has been rejected by Ukrainian officials and the U.S. intelligence community, and Russia has provided no proof. In a formal letter to the Security Council, Ukraine's ambassador emphasized that the missile strike represents a grave and unprecedented danger to the security of Europe as a whole. Ukrainian officials have also stated that the country has no current means to intercept the Oreshnik. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We will now move. Okay, so next item on the agenda, we're going to take a look at an article. Mr. Erlend, if possible, could you pull up Stanimir's article? So yeah, there was an article published in The Guardian. It's kind of an economic analysis of Russia. I think the headline is a bit sensationalist, but I think there's like some stuff we could discuss in terms of like the sort of a general analysis of the article. So I wanted to just go, I guess, like kind of point by point. Obviously, I expect not a lot of people read the article, which is fine. So the general summary is this guy is arguing that in the short term, the Russian economy is able to sustain the war. I think that's like the general point. I'm not sure we totally disagree with the point, but I think it's more interesting to kind of look at the data he's using to make that argument and to evaluate whether or not it kind of supports his point. So we'll look at the actual stuff that he's bringing up. So a lot of the stuff he says, I don't think we disagree with. For example, like U.S. sanctions and stronger ruble that means that Russia doesn't make as much in dollar-denominated oil revenue. Economic growth slowing to almost zero from IMF projections. I think maybe Stanimir would say, though, that those are like the most optimistic projections.
Currently, yes. And I would say that also on the thing that they've already reduced the receipts for Moscow, that hasn't been seen. So since the US sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, the last few months, we haven't seen actually the updated data on how much they're going to tax oil exporters. And we haven't seen the full effect of the drop of the price of the Ural oil to around $44, $42 per barrel. So that is going to hit more in the first quarter of 2026. And the strong ruble only then will be coupled because it hasn't been as strong recently. We got to the point of 77, 78 rubles per dollar only in November and December. So they're just yet about to actually experience the decrease of oil revenue from those actions. It's going to happen in the first quarter of 2026. It only hit December of 2025. So they're going to see their deficit widen in the first quarter of 2026 to the full extent of these new prices for their oil.
Right, yeah. And so then we keep moving to interest rates near 20%. This has, to some extent, gotten inflation under control, at least according to official figures. I think that kind of masks like more structural problems with inflation in their economy, but I don't know. I would say that's largely true. They've kept interest rates super high, and to some extent that's kept inflation under control. Or do you disagree, Stanimir?
Yes, they've kept interest rates high, and that to some degree has helped inflation, but also what's helped inflation is a bit of underreporting from the side of Rostat. If we look at such things like the Center for Macroeconomic Projection, SMAC, they have another rating they follow, that is the inflation for the poor people, and that's diverged significantly. We're talking about several percent. This is just inflation on the key goods people buy. So if in the general inflation that Rostat tracks, it includes things like the cost of foreign trips for tourists, that's not tracked in that inflation for the poor that SMAC tracks. And also we have the inflation tracking from the Russian Central Bank, which tracks inflation expectations and inflation as it's seen by the population, and that has stayed at over 12%, around 13 to 14% consistently in the end of the year. So yes, they got to below 6%, but if you look at the other inflation factors, that has diverged from them. And at the end of the year, also inflation started going up again by over 0.2% per week. So we're going to see another jump in inflation in 2026, least of all because of the increased VAT taxes on everything apart from medication and key groceries. So yeah, we're going to see a jump in inflation. So it's not going to be as mild at the start of 2026 as people expect from the 4% projection by the Russian Central Bank.
Right. Yeah, I think that's. I agree. I don't know what else to say. So then the next point is unemployment is very low, and that there's a severe labor shortage, which I think we don't disagree. Household incomes grew for a while due to welfare spending, but now they're stagnating because they don't have the money to spend on social programs. I don't think we disagree. Business leaders report little incentive to invest. Mostly agree. I would say the incentive is to not upset Vladimir Putin, but or other factions in Russia. But
it's gotten to the point that actual investment in the economy is now decreasing from what it used to be. It used to be growing at the start of the year, and now it's decreasing. So yes, there's no incentive, and also consumption by people has been decreasing according to this Bear Index that tracks consumption. At the end of the year, it started decreasing and it fell below growth to the point that we are really doubting some of the figures that Rostat is publishing because they're contradicting what we're seeing. So we're going to see a general slowdown of the economy because of that. The only bright spot when it comes to indices has been the services PMI, which has been growing the last 2 months, but manufacturing has been contracting for the last several months, and also industrial output has started to contract even in Rostat official statistics. So that's showing us that Russian economy is going to probably not grow at all in 2026. Actually, the opposite, unless they start massaging the data even further or start making certain sub-data fields classified as they did before. For example, the data on birth rates is now classified in Russia, so we can't do projections, and we can't say that people are being cautious when starting a family because of the state of the economy.
Right. And so now I think we finally get into some areas where we would start pushing back a little more seriously. Like I think before this, you could maybe argue that we would say that he's using more optimistic numbers than maybe the underlying data really suggests. But now we get to, I think, where we kind of just disagree in general. The first is that oil revenue fell from 50% of state income to 25. I don't know if I assume we agree with that part, but the government's been able to compensate via higher household and business taxes. I don't know if we would agree that's sustainable. I should say you, Stanimir.
Taxes in the last parts of 2025, we're talking about the non-oil and gas revenue for the budget have been actually falling. One of the main things that brings in revenue, which is the income tax on companies, we've seen a decrease in the reported profits of companies significantly. We're talking double-digit percentages. And that means that they're going to get a lot less than they're planning for 2025. And for 2026 is going to be even worse because we're seeing companies more and more report losses rather than profits. So yes, oil and gas revenue has fallen as a percentage of the budget. They've raised taxes, but those taxes haven't actually resulted in the growth of revenues they expected. And actually, we're starting to see declining revenues from those sources in the end of 2025 and in the start of 2026. So the other point is that, yes, it's 25%, but you also have to factor in other points of revenue when it comes to the oil and gas sector, which will be impacted, because I don't think the oil and gas taxes directly include the dividends they get from state-owned companies that are linked to this, or the other forms of taxes that these state-owned companies actually provide to the government. So that's going to also decrease. And finally, we're going to probably see in the first quarter of 2026 a decrease in directly from the Ural oil, a decrease in the revenue from what they planned by something like 60%, just from that sector alone. They're making up in certain ways, like raising the domestic price of gas, but beyond that, they're not doing anything other than that to protect their oil and gas revenues. It's just going downhill.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think in its current configuration, like I'm certainly not as like well versed in the Russian economy as you, but like in its current configuration, Russia needs oil prices to be sustainable, and they have to have that extra money to like sustain all the stuff they've been trying to do. There's no way they can run their budget efficiently without it, without seriously like eating into their population's economic activity, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. So yeah, I don't know. Like the idea that them losing state income from oil is not a big deal, and that also I think like more importantly that the oil market has adapted pretty well without them. You know, as of late, is a pretty severe blow to the Russian budget, and I don't know. I think that the author's definitely underplaying.
And
next,
also, we have to say that it's not just that they've already eaten away most of what they had as government savings in the National Welfare Fund. We expect that to be completely empty in January. So as soon as the data comes in, they're probably going to have swapped all that gold they had there with some of the state banks for rubles, and that's how they cover the deficits for 2025. If they run serious deficits, as it's going to happen most likely in 2026, they already plan for a rather big deficit. There's no other place to fund it apart from taking out very expensive debt. And also something that we don't really cover often is that the Russian regions, so the regional budgets, apart from the federal ones, are also running a deficit. I think it's around, it's over 1.7 trillion rubles is planned for 2026, from what I gathered from the way the budgets were published. Usually Moscow, which accounts for almost a third of that, overperforms in terms of revenue, but the rest of the regions underperform in terms of revenue, and they have to fund their deficits in other ways or get bailouts from the central government. So that's also another source of deficit that's not accounted for here. And these regions are usually taking out loans at 16, 17%. 20% was what they were taking out loans at the start of last year for Kemerovo region, for example.
Right. And so then I think we finally go off the rails, which is where he starts comparing debt to GDP. So he says, Russia's debt to GDP is just under 20%. Its deficit is about 3.5% of GDP. And then he says, by comparison, the UK deficit is 11% during COVID, which is, I mean, I don't know. And then debt is 95% of GDP. Now, look, I'm not going to sit here and say like, well, the UK budget is super well balanced and great. That being said, it's not a meaningful comparison. It sort of, to me, implies that a lot of kind of the reason that this analysis is a little bit off to me, which is that he's sort of trying to compare apples to apples here. He's trying to use metrics we would use to measure the U.S. economy or the UK economy, or even other economies that are like a little less rational. The Russian economy is just built different, and there's other metrics you have to look at. And I don't know, like on paper, yes, you can make some of these arguments, but they don't really explain the reality of the situation. So if you wanted to speak a little bit to the debt to GDP.
Yeah, I want to point out that no one is buying Russian debt internationally. So that debt to GDP rating is largely meaningless. When we look at how they're funding their deficit in terms of domestic borrowing, we're looking for 2025 for the last quarter between 15% and 14.6%. That's how they were doing in terms of the yield on their debt. And here we're talking debt with maturity from anywhere from 5 years to 13 and 15 years, in some cases 24 years. This is not cheap, and this is going to stay with the Russian government for a while. And also, I have to point out that Russia now has reached the point that it's spending more than 10% of its federal budget just in servicing existing loans and existing domestic debt, and that's growing every year. And it's probably going to grow again this year because they have no other way to subsidize this debt. And they're doing a lot of the money is being raised through repo auctions by the central bank to the Russian large banks, and then the Russian large banks are buying this debt. So in a way, we're doing printing. So they're at a point where it feels more like their debt to GDP ratio is over 150%. And not 20% in terms of what they're getting when it comes to funding and the cost of that funding. So yeah, I wouldn't compare it to the UK at all. Even China isn't buying Russian debt, and also they were forced to do a domestic issue in yuan just to have a benchmark for local issuers, because they're not able to, Russian companies are not able to raise debt in yuan in China. And now they're doing it in Russia as an alternative to lower debt servicing. So yeah, it's not comparable at all.
Yeah, and I don't know. To me, that just kind of belies the whole conceit of the article to some degree. But that being said, I think like we were talking about, we agreed with certain points. I think that even though we kind of disagree with how he arrived there, we sort of agree with the general argument, which he's saying that sanctions haven't been enough to deter Russia from continuing. I think so far that's true. I don't know if we can really speak to how long Russia can sustain this before their economy, quote unquote, collapses, or it meaningfully deters the leadership from continuing the war against Ukraine. I don't know, Stanimir, did you want to speak to that at all?
Well, we've seen entire sectors of the economy collapse, like the automotive sector, coal mining sector. Now we're seeing a similar thing with the oil sector in terms of revenue. Some of the biggest companies like Surgutneft are reporting not profits, but just losses. And we're going to see that in the catering, so restaurants. We're going to also see problems in the steelmaking industry, which have only gotten worse since the start of 2025. And the only thing I can say is that there might be more will in Putin to continue the war, even as his economy collapses around him. So he might be seeing that and ignoring it. But apart from that, they're headed that way. No one expects a recovery in 2026 in these sectors. There might be a slight recovery for, let's say, the automotive sector in terms of cars, not so much trucks, because they forced all the taxi drivers, or 75% of the taxi drivers, to buy new cars. But that's about it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that some of this stuff it's just, like I was saying before, the Russian economy is structured quite differently than somewhere like the UK. And as you were mentioning, there are just these kind of dominoes of you can't. Some of this stuff isn't going to be replaceable if they lose their ability to export it competitively on the world market, right? And it just indicates that all those key industries are definitely going to. I would agree with your assessment that it's sort of the economy is crumbling around them, but yeah, it's just. There is still the ability for Russia to continue the war in the short term, I guess. So, yeah, I don't know anything else. I think that's pretty much all the main arguments that the article makes. Stanimir, is there anything else you wanted to say, kind of in conclusion?
No, I think we covered most of it. But yes, it looks at some high-level data and high-level indicators without looking beneath in individual sectors, which might impact things later or might not show up there. You don't see the construction sector collapse in the Russian revenue streams, but you have the head of the construction ministry and also the deputy prime minister on construction, both talking about unexpected collapse in the sector if mortgages are just 200 billion rubles less in 2026 compared to 2025, and we might be getting there because construction is slowing down.
Okay, yeah. So we didn't have any data coming in from Russia this week because of the holidays, but I assume you'll be resuming your standard reports on the Russian economy next week, Stanimir, is that right?
Yeah, we only had more weather data because part of Russia is now stuck in a cyclone called Francis, and they have a lot of issues because of that in terms of airports. Just today, I think Sheremetyevo had significant problems in terms of receiving aircraft because of the storm. And they've had some issues, but small ones, from Ukrainian drone strikes within Russia when it comes to airport travel. But not major airports have been impacted. I think the storm has done more damage to the Moscow airports than the Ukrainian strikes. And beyond that, when it comes to Ukrainian strikes on infrastructure, we've gotten a big one where in Belgorod, they haven't had power and water and heating for over 2 days. The maximum impact was around 600,000 people, according to the governor. And people continue to be without water and heating and power in the northern parts of the city. So that's a new thing that they haven't had to deal with until now. And even with all the generators that have been delivered, they haven't been able to fully supply people or businesses.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a bigger issue, obviously during the critical heating time in both Russia and Ukraine. So, yeah. So I got a bunch of topics. I'm just trying to stay on top of all this. So much is going on in the world right now. The first topic, I wanted to get a little more detail on Oreshnik. There was a lot of discussion about Oreshnik on the internet, I guess, and I just wanted to kind of cover what we actually know. So the actual device itself, the missile part, was recovered, but in terms of where there were 6 submunitions, and you can see it in the video of the strike. Where those hit, it's still not really known. No one's been able to independently confirm where they hit. We've gotten a few different accounts of your mic's on, Erlend, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the location of where one of the videos were captured has been geolocated, but there are conflicting reports about where exactly the impact was. Initially, someone geolocated it to, or they attempted to geolocate it. I'm very doubtful about that geolocation to a repair facility at the Lviv airport. But I cannot say that the proofing of that geolocation was credible. It could have actually been more than several thousand meters away from that, because the video, you can see the view here. There is no real way you can prove where it actually landed in this video or any of the other videos that have been published.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much like the general consensus, I would say, is that nobody knows where the submunitions themselves hit. There have been, as Erlend said, like kind of different news articles about it that claim that it hit different things. And it's, I mean, there are 6 submunitions. It is possible it hit all those things. But as Erlend was saying, at least one of them is based on kind of a dubious reasoning, right? That someone's claiming that from this video, they're like, oh, it definitely hit that aviation repair facility. And then, there's also claim that they hit a gas, gas storage facility. But again, there's no evidence of that. So, we're not saying that it's impossible that these things happen, just that we can't find any actual evidence of those things happening. So yeah, that's pretty much what we know. There's some debate about whether or not the actual submunitions themselves were even intended to be submunitions. In other words, that they were weapons, or if they were kind of dummy rounds that were put in as kind of part of a demonstration. Because kind of, as I mentioned before, the actual attack is viewed, I'd say, by most people as a attempt by Russia, sort of information operation to claim, hey, we have this missile. It's not possible for you to intercept it. It's sort of invincible. And, we're going to use it really close to your border just to spook you, something like that. That said, our resident missile expert, Mr. John Ridge, was saying it's not really conclusive either way, whether or not that was those submunitions were intended to be weapons, or whether they were just kind of dummy rounds that they put in there. So yeah, I don't know. We don't know a lot about this strike. It's the second Oreshnik strike that's happened. I think this one's getting more media coverage because of the context that it happened, right? As I mentioned before, this is viewed as partly kind of a response to, I guess you'd say, U.S.-led peace efforts. And this is happening at a time when, the strategic strikes on both sides are intensifying, and the consequences of that are pretty serious because of the weather. So, yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to say about Oreshnik?
I will say that in the initial employment against Dnipro, those the MIRVs, the submunitions, you could say MIRV is multiple independently targetable reentry vehicle. So it's a very common feature on these long-range ballistic missiles that there are multiple warheads that dispense from the main missile body, and then typically those would have a nuclear payload, but in this case, obviously they don't. And in that first instance, those warheads were inert, as I understand it. So there wasn't actually any explosive payload on them. Whether they did or didn't in this case, I don't know. It's still very inconclusive based on the available information that seems to be out there. Ultimately, it doesn't particularly matter, would be my point. As you mentioned, Joseph, this is fundamentally a psyop of sorts. Oreshnik is not a particularly novel or interesting missile. There's really nothing particularly sophisticated about it. But the Russians are just trying to portray it as some sort of wonder weapon for these propaganda purposes. They're trying to frighten Ukraine, frighten us into believing that they have some sort of super weapon that can't be intercepted, which is not true at all. Again, there's nothing really sophisticated about Oreshnik. The United States and other countries have ballistic missile interceptors that are more than capable of intercepting it. Ukraine less so. It's not the class of threat that PAC-3 MSE is really optimized to defeat. But it doesn't really matter because, again, this is something that Russia is not employing routinely, and it's not being employed again with the intention of actually delivering lethal effects on target. It's all just an information operation. It's about signaling. It's about sort of provoking an irrational response on our part. So it's not something that we should really be focusing so much on. It's not the main threat to Ukraine. The ongoing complex raids from the Shaheds, all these one-way attack UAS, all the other missiles in Russia's arsenal, that's what is really a threat to Ukraine. Using an Oreshnik every once in a while is not something that we should be tremendously concerned about.
Yeah, I think that's very well put, Colby. Thank you. Cool. So I think that's the Oreshnik topic. We got lots more to go. Erlend, this next one I'm going to ask you about. There is word on the street. Now, Erlend, I've seen a lot of things get put on drones during this whole sorted affair, and I've seen flamethrowers, Erlend, put on drones. I've seen machine guns put on drones. I've seen sticks put on drones. I don't know. I mean, I could go on, but the point is, now they're putting man pads on drones, Erlend. So you want to talk me through this one?
Well, I want to, make everyone aware that I'm not an air defense guy, but from what I understand, this could be a potential threat towards helicopters specifically. So if that is the purpose, then that can, I would say that the effect would probably be more that they would scare off Ukraine using helicopters in order to intercept Shahed drones. But from what we know now, there's been no verified incident of this actually being successful in taking down any Ukrainian aircraft. And until we see that becoming a problem, I wouldn't be too worried about it. What I can say is that as Ukraine is developing drone-based systems that are more and more successful in taking down Shahed drones or larger loitering munitions, that threat wouldn't be a man pad wouldn't be very useful in protecting the Shahed drone. So that would be wasteful development, in my opinion. And from what I see, the Ukrainians are more and more successful, and also creating kind of a vast force of what they call anti-Shahed drone interceptor teams. Long title, but yeah. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. If it happened a year ago, I think it would have been a much more problematic affair for Ukraine to deal with. But yeah, it's not easy to say much about it yet because there are so few incidents.
Yeah, I guess like the reasoning on paper makes sense. In other words, Ukraine is using airplanes to shoot down a lot of drones, as far as I understand. So like the idea of putting some drones that can, spook aircraft or have active defense against aircraft to maybe deter them a little bit from attacking all the other drones is maybe the idea conceptually, but obviously I don't think you can just stick a man pad on a Shahed and call the problem solved. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to see if, as you said, like anything comes of this.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, it could be problematic. Not sure how effective it would be in practice. I assume that quite a lot of development and testing would need to occur before it actually is reliable. One thing that is kind of a problem that we see more is that the Russians are, which I think is much more concerning, is that the Russians are using the Shahed drones much more actively guided towards tactical positions, and they're using communication systems much more frequently on the Shahed drones in order to guide them much more precisely towards tactical targets, which makes the Shahed problem much more of a tactical problem rather than a civilian problem in Ukraine, which I think will have more impact and is having more impact already than this.
Okay, well, thank you, Erlend. We'll do our best to keep track of all this drone stuff going on. So, the game changes very quickly, and obviously we're not, on the ground dealing with it. But I think Erlend at least has a general idea. Okay, next topic is the oil tanker that was seized, the Marinera. I talked about this, or the Bella 1, sometimes it's also called, because they changed the name a lot because they're smuggling oil. But I talked about this last week. The tanker, basically Venezuela happened. The U.S. went in and kidnapped the president. And a bunch of like oil smuggling ships were kind of caught with their pants down. And they started making a break for it. And U.S. Coast Guard would like a word with them. A lot of them didn't have any national flags because, they're smuggling oil. So this one of these ships, the Bella 1 or the Marinera, was making a break for it, had no flag. Coast Guard can legally pull them over if they have no flag, no license plate. And they immediately hit the gas. And I'm sorry to use all these metaphors. I'm a landlocked person. They hit the gas. They turned into a chase. They painted the Russian flag on their ship, and then they registered themselves in the Russian ship directory. And of course, in maritime law internationally, this is not recognized as a valid strategy. But I think the general hope from the company is, and this would all be directed by the company that owns it, which is a Turkish company. I couldn't find any actual paper trail that linked it back to like some Russian oligarch or something, but who knows? I assume you don't register an oil smuggling ship in the country you're actually from. So it's probably, the one thing I could say is probably not a Turkish guy, but I don't know. Anyway, the point is the company would make all these decisions. So probably what they said is you're going to be smuggling a lot of oil. If a U.S. ship pursues you, immediately paint the Russian flag on and call us and we'll register the ship. And that's what the crew was told to do. The crews are kind of just hired by agencies. I don't know if I'm not saying that they're completely innocent here, but I think a lot of this was just decided by some shell company. Point is, U.S. under international maritime law said this excuse is not valid to just paint the Russian flag on your ship. The hope probably by the company was that it would create enough like friction that it would at least give like the U.S. pause, and it would take a bunch of time to resolve it. And by then maybe they could figure something out. That was the idea, was to like throw a wrench in the works by like saying, oh, we're going to register with your geopolitical rival. What do you think about that? The Russians took this pretty seriously, I think. They sort of seemed to, a lot of people were speculating that there was something, spooky on the ship, maybe weapons or something like that, that were being smuggled. To me, it just looked like a lot of this could be explained through the trivialities of like maritime law and the way things are done. I think that I was mostly validated. As far as I know, nothing was found on the ship. I'm sure a lot of the people who were claiming that would say, but aha, it's all a secret. But the point is, I think that they just ran away. And Russia is sort of defending this principle of like, we're going to let, people smuggle oil. Like that was kind of Russia's stake in all this. But Russia did respond, and they were said to have dispatched a submarine and a small, I think destroyer type vessel. I'm not sure. And they were apparently on the way. There's some dispute. I lean towards the idea that the Russians didn't make it in time before the US, and supported by some allied countries. I think the UK and Norway helped seize the tanker. But there were kind of conflicting reports. There was a report right after the fact that said that the Russian Navy wasn't in the area. There was some reports like a little further after the fact that said they were. In any case, I think that probably the phrase "in the area" is like up for debate, and who knows, or it's not really relevant. But in general, I would say it was a positive operation. The U.S. enforced international maritime law as it's kind of in the spirit of it, which is you can't just paint a flag on your vessel mid-pursuit and get the protection of a rival military power. And then as far as like domestically in Russia, I think it made Russia look a little bit impotent. They made a big show of like, we're going to protect this ship and kind of like defend our right to smuggle stuff. And they sent a military presence on the way, and the U.S. just ignored it and just did it anyway. So that kind of makes them look like weak, right? So I think that was kind of how the general sentiment, at least like in the Russian information space, that's kind of how it was perceived. But yeah, so that was pretty much my summary of it. It was a crazy set of events. It was, as far as I can tell, pretty much a random tanker that was just looking out for its own oil smuggling self, and caused this huge international incident. Of course, it was Russia's choice to escalate it. They could have just said, no, we're not going to help you. But again, I think Russia's just kind of either grasping at straws for ways to get leverage over the U.S., or they just kind of generally are trying to assert this principle of the right to smuggle oil outside of the U.S. Financial system, basically. So yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any other thoughts on this oil tanker thing before hopefully we put it to bed?
Well, I hope that this can be a potential, let's call it an icebreaker for not necessarily the same situation with other Shadow Fleet tankers, but the concept is the same. We've been, watching these tankers for a very long time, and they've been passing through Danish, Swedish waters without any reaction at all, except for when there's been direct suspicion of sabotage against some undersea cables, etc. There's been a couple of incidents where the Finns and the Estonians have temporarily at least ceased merchant vessels in the Shadow Fleet. Hopefully this will break the ice for European governments as well, because the complexity of the operation itself isn't, without, it's not exclusive to the US. This is something that European militaries can perform easily as well. And the Russians will have no way of actually escorting all their Shadow Fleet tankers everywhere. I hope they will try, because it will be a waste of resources.
I want to add that in terms of number of tankers in the Shadow Fleet that are not registered in Western countries or do not have insurance from Western countries, but are used for smuggling Russian oil, we're talking about 527, I think. That's the entirety. Although they use a similar amount that are insured in Europe. But yeah, that's the size of the shadow fleet.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a weird chapter of a real issue, which is kind of the increased hostility of like the Russians are being very militant, as Erlend was saying. They're trying to escort a bunch of these ships and kind of make a statement that like if you mess with them, you're messing with Russia, something like that. So there is this larger context that it was unfolding in. But as far as I can tell, it was a pretty random series of events that led this whole thing to unfold the way it did. Well, I shouldn't say random, but well, indirect, I guess maybe is a better word. But like the Venezuela thing triggered this other stuff that triggered this other stuff, and then this company, got it in the mix, and it all happened. Okay, and then my final story this week, of course, is the security guarantees discussion. There was basically not a completely definitive agreement made, but there was a big meeting in Europe. Apparently, Witkoff and Kushner were there on behalf of the U.S., and the Europeans were all there, and Ukraine was there, and they like ironed out a pretty, at least according to Ukraine's statements, like specific proposal for security guarantees to have moving forward after some kind of a ceasefire is achieved. The general discussion of it is pretty vague. I think Erlend was pointing out, like, the Europeans have basically said there are security guarantees, but there's been like no specifics about what the guarantees are or how they work. The US, there's been some vague discussion about a 15-year security guarantee that is Article 5 like. I don't know. None of that's like proven, or I don't know if we've seen any like actual proof of that, but that seems to be what the Ukrainians are implying. I have seen reporting that like the US, or at least Trump specifically, was saying 10 years originally, but the Ukrainians were saying that that's like not long enough, which I think I would agree. 10 years is like just long enough for Russia to be like, all right, let's do it again. So 15 years, I guess, is probably the result of, Ukraine negotiating a little bit. So that's the general stuff. Is we don't know any specifics, but that's what was discussed. The other major point discussed is that European countries, specifically France and the UK, agreed to deploy troops after a ceasefire was reached. I think that, again, a lot of the specifics are a bit unclear, but I think that it's clear from the language that the goal would be to train Ukrainians. I don't think that anyone views these 15,000 troops as sufficient to actually like enforce a ceasefire like militarily. I think that's the general stuff. Erlend, did you want to get into anything more specific?
No, I just wanted to reiterate that last fact, and it's been pretty much stated by the UK and France that these 15,000 troops would be there in order to train the Ukrainian forces as a deterrence for future threats from Russia. So the soldiers being sent to Ukraine are not going to be in any way or form combat troops, but there's been mentioning of some sort of an inspection of ceasefire being performed by Western troops, but I don't think that has been, there's no concrete proposal, or that is official at least, on how that would function. I wanted to say that at least Norway has said that we will send troops, but there's no promise on how many and what specific role we would have, other than that it would be also to train Ukrainian troops. The Ukrainians have always said that when it comes to security guarantees and Western troops, you would need more than 100,000 troops in order to create some sort of tripwire effect. And this is probably a calculation that they've done with traditional military planning on how many battalions and brigades you need in order to distribute Western forces on the front line. And it's not, I've seen a lot of people say, yeah, but we have so many thousand troops in Europe. Can't we spare 5%? Well, yeah, of course. But the problem is that you would need brigades and battalions that can independently actually operate, because there's no way we're going to integrate a company of European force, Western European forces into Ukrainian system right now. Maybe in 10 years, but I think that's far away from what we can, for the interoperability that we could field in a relatively short period of time. Other than that, also you need enormous amount of equipment and logistics to field a brigade that is combat ready. So this is a very complicated calculus, and pure numbers isn't just it's not the only factor at all. Far from it. So yeah. I wouldn't say that this is a part of the security guarantees. It's a part of rebuilding the Ukrainian military, which is obviously needed as well.
Right. It's like an indirect thing. It's not directly, these troops aren't directly there to enforce the security guarantee, but indirectly they're there to strengthen the deterrence effect of the Ukrainian military, which hopefully will, in the long run, keep the treaty binding. But yeah, I think that conflating the two together in this news article, or in the general news discussion, made it a bit confusing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is something that absolutely we should do already, in my opinion. I don't see any good valid reason for not training Ukrainians in Ukraine on a mass scale with Western troops is already being done. But this operation taking place is, assuming that the Russians will not. The success of it is basically based on the Russians not violating any peace treaty, which we know for a fact that they don't care about much. A piece of paper is not much value for the Russians. So I don't really see much positivity except the declaring willingness to deploy troops. Maybe is a step closer to doing it with or without a ceasefire or a peace treaty.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's it's going to be an ongoing security problem for Europe for the foreseeable future. I think is probably the best way to summarize it, right?
Yeah, and they signed a piece of paper, but there's essentially not much news except for the numbers that they gave, because this has been announced already independently, both from the UK and France. We're, I think, approaching a year ago or 10 months ago or something.
Yep. So I don't know. Anyone else have any thoughts on the recent security guarantees discussion? Okay. Well, chat. Let's see if anyone's got any questions. Who's ready for a new war bingo 2026? Looking busy. Yeah, man. It's a busy. It is January 11th.
Nothing ever happens, right?
Right. Yeah. That's. I've been praying to the nothing ever happens gods, but yeah. I think I don't know. I see some general kind of discussion in chat. I don't see any real questions. Do you, Erlend?
Well, there was I don't know if it's a question, but Alan Post is saying, I still don't understand why airborne gun systems haven't been more effective for Ukrainian air defense. Airborne gun systems. So I assume that this is about autocannons on fighter planes intercepting drones. I don't know, Colby, do you have any general assessment of why we don't see much of that, or if it is favorable to the Ukrainians to even use or attempt to use gun systems to take down drones?
I think it has happened. I wouldn't say that absence of evidence is evidence of absence. So just because we don't necessarily see or hear about it happening doesn't mean that it isn't happening. But yeah, I don't have any firm statistics on that question. So, but I'm fairly confident that it has been done. But yeah, I don't have anything more to offer beyond that.
I just wanted to add that assuming that an F-16, Ukrainian F-16 pilot is approaching a cluster of Russian Shaheds on their way to the target, they have a certain number of air-to-air missiles. They will most certainly always use the air-to-air missiles before they try to use a gun system. And when they've expended their air-to-air missiles, the probability of a Shahed drone being over or in the vicinity of an inhabited area is much more likely, and spraying a autocannon over a city or a town is problematic. So the conditions needs to be set as well, which I think is much more unlikely to happen often.
Weren't they also using like older aircraft? Because like I assume a jet's real fast. So if you don't, you need something to go slower to like shoot it with a machine gun. That's what we're talking about, right?
I think it's much more risky, and also they've been using some old Yak 2 or whatever trainers. Yeah, I don't remember the actual model, but old Yak trainer
52.
aircraft. 52, yeah. With not mounted gun systems, but with basically just the backseat pilot spraying machine gun fire on the drones. Yeah.
Yep. So I don't know. Take from that what you will. So we got a couple questions. Someone was asking, is there another regime that should fall that is friendly towards Russia? I think you could make the case that North Korea should fall. I think that South Korea would be a little worried. It would cause, and China, because it would cause like a huge refugee crisis. But I don't see any other end to that regime. That's pretty much hit the same dead end as all these other regimes. I think that it's sort of the final stop for these like authoritarian regimes. But yeah,
Nope.
Go ahead, Colby.
Belarus is the obvious one that's a lot more plausible than North Korea.
True. Yeah.
I mean, if just as a purely theoretical exercise, if we saw in Belarus the sort of civil unrest that we're seeing in Iran right now, that would obviously pose a very significant problem for Belarus and by extension Russia as well. So I don't think that that's necessarily likely, but we've seen very large scale protests in Belarus before. I would offer that the reason why Belarus's own armed forces have not participated directly in offensive operations against Ukraine is because that would destabilize the country and lead to those kinds of protests. So Lukashenko seems to be acutely aware of this, and Putin probably is fine with that because he understands that it would create a more headache than any potential gain. So I don't anticipate that happening, that we're going to see mass uprisings in Belarus, but you never know. I mean, things can just kind of spontaneously happen sometimes. So that's a could. I don't know if it's a should, but that's a, obviously it would be in Ukraine's interest for that to happen. It would create a lot of problems for the Kremlin, but I won't offer any prediction about how likely that is. I don't know. What do you think, Joseph? You're much more in tune with things going on in the former Soviet sphere than I am. So,
well, I think it's a much better answer than mine. First off, Colby.
Well, thank you.
Second off, I can add something for
Belarus. Stanimir probably got the best insights
definitely
on this. So
I would point out that unlike Putin, Lukashenko is actually a politician, and in the past has been a successful politician. So he has more political instincts than Putin when it comes to what might destabilize him. So that would probably be the reason why he's now releasing a lot of political prisoners and easing up a bit of the valve on repressions and trying to sort of make the best of what is a new U.S. administration and normalize relations with them. But also Belarus has been probably the most effective leech on Russia in terms of resources, because they know how to play Putin, and every time they've seen a decrease in the subsidized oil, gas, and also direct cash inflows, they've managed to do overtures to the West to actually resume those subsidized deliveries. So I think in terms of a net drain on Russia, Belarus staying with Lukashenko is a bigger problem for them than Belarus being independent and being run by another politician.
Yeah, definitely good points. That was something I was going to bring up, was that it seems like Lukashenko, I'd say, like, as you said, there have been some prisoners that have been released very recently. I think it has like two implications. The first is, I think you already pointed out, it seems to me that Lukashenko feels comfortable enough to like loosen the repression valve a little bit, and that he's not going to like fall from power if he does that. And then the second is he's really trying to bank on having a better relationship. He's really banking on cultivating a personal relationship with Trump. And I don't know how well it's working, but there's not a lot of evidence that it's not working. So it seems to be sort of working. Yeah, I don't know. He is to some degree a reasonably good politician when in certain he's very good at like leveraging the West against Russia and vice versa. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like the term that has been often used about Lukashenko politically wise is a political animal, and I think it's a fitting term. He seems very stupid, he does all these wonky things like picking potatoes and weird costumes and pointing at stupid maps, and he may be a little bit slow when it comes to certain things, but in the long run he has some reason managed to wiggle himself to stay in power, and he's played the EU very cleverly in the past, over and over again.
So, I want to point out that this is a man who recently made increasing prices illegal in Belarus by decree. So yeah, there are some fields in which he's very lacking. Running the Belarusian economy isn't his thing, beyond digging for potatoes. But in terms of political acumen, he definitely has some. and has shown that on numerous occasions. And I want to point out that also Belarusian firms are making use of the union state with Russia and actually destroying part of the Russian economy. So it's not just China that's cannibalizing the Russian economy, but it's also Belarusian firms, which are, for example, when it comes to agricultural equipment, Belarusian firms have double what their size should be in terms of market share in Russia. Similarly, with Belarusian trucks, they have double what their market share is. And they offer better financing because they can use funds that Russia has provided to stabilize Belarus, use that funds to outcompete Russian companies when it comes to financing for equipment. So they're essentially using Russian money to destroy the Russian economy.
Yeah, so I don't know. Good questions, chat. I think we can probably wrap it up here. Erlend, is there anything else we should add?
Well, there was a mention here by Robin, interesting Kyiv Independent Insight piece today on the Ukrainian mobilization system using OSINT to show reduced attacks on the system. Have you guys heard anything on this area recently? Other than the Kyiv Independent article, I just encourage everyone to go and read that because we haven't really done any research into this.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I missed that question. Yeah, same for Erlend. Haven't seen anything about it, but yeah, I assume they mean like attacks by saboteurs on the mobilization centers. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's one thing, and yeah, saboteurs, people who have been bribed or fooled by Russian call centers, as Ukraine also does to Russia on a much larger scale. And I think also cyber attacks. I don't remember now, but one thing that I saw is in relation to this is that Budanov has been talking about the importance of making sure that the TCK or the region offices that are actually in charge of mobilization needs to get their shit together, basically, because it is very important that they do not abuse their powers or act outside of their directives, because that would cause much more skepticism towards the military and military service than what is needed. So, but yeah, so I know Budanov is I think actively looking into what can be done to better the TCK. Basically, it's not directly related to this, but it's related to the same problem, I would say.
We're gonna have like that Marco Rubio meme with Budanov where he's like doing every job.
But yeah, I mean, if this is one of the first things that he is looking at as chief of staff, I would assume that means he has had some built up frustration about this problem for a while.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right. Well, I think are we still trying to kidnap people for the basement?
Yeah, absolutely. If people are interested in contributing to the basement, which is the people that are volunteering to help Andrew and his Ukraine Daily Update map project, please go to our website and sign up. The main tasks will be to geolocate videos and break down videos, categorize them, identify vehicles, etc. But we have a task for everyone that is fairly handy with a computer. You don't need like IT skills, but you need to be able to use a spreadsheet, and everything is browser based, so you don't need any specific software. But if you're interested, please sign up, and then we will contact you and have a short conversation about your motivations and about what kind of tasks that you would be interested in. One thing that we're looking specifically for is contributors that could help working on the Human Safari project, or rather aiding Brendan's work in mapping civilian casualties and news events that are related to the war that impact civilians. We have an enormous database on civilian casualties that are directly connected to the Human Safari project, and we would very much like to go through that backlog and basically try and match up these incidents with geolocated footage that we have, because those are two different databases, but we have enormous amount of footage from the area of drone strikes that it would be very good to have a match with specific incidents. You could, either for displaying on the map as well, but also for possibly war crime investigations, etc.
Yeah, so head on down to Tochnyi.info, check out all the cool articles and maps and stuff. You can interact with this here map yourself. It's a very depressing but extremely well made map, very accurate, and yeah, they've done a really incredible job, all the researchers who put this together. So yeah, lots of stuff like that over at Tochnyi.info, and if you're so inclined to help out with documenting some of the things that are going on, then yeah, click that join the basement link. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for us this week. I would like to thank our illustrious panel, Mr. Erlend, Stanimir, and Colby. Of course, thank you, chat, for tuning in. Thanks for asking all your questions. It helps us get your feedback and understand what you guys want to know more about. And thanks, of course, to everyone watching after the fact. We know not everyone can make it to the live, and apparently someone was having some tech issues, and they're going to watch it later, and you know we can respect that. So we'll see everyone next week, same time, 2100 Kyiv time on Sunday. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
On behalf of the brave.